It is the August 19th, 20th, depending on where you're listening to this, PFF Forecast, and we've got a great one for you today. We've got Mike Renner. It's going to talk NFL Draft, NFL Draft Guide. PFF's NFL Draft Guide just dropped. And then we've got Adam Schefter. It was awesome. Let's rock. This was a fun one.
Yeah, it was just great.
It was great. Adam Schefter's interview, you'll want to stick around for that because it's hilarious. The dude is an absolute machine, and I don't want to give it away. But he called us out for a few things.
So inspirational, really. The
efficiency, like
the
seeing
energy
that
he brought. It makes me. I feel like we bring energy to our radio hits, but I have to step it up a notch.
It was. You'll have to listen. Yeah. It was inspiring.
And Mike was terrific, as he always is. We give him a lot of crap for his off the field exploits
for other things,
but he's an amazing analyst, and I think it shows today.
Yeah, we talked. So we talk NFL draft with him. We break down the quarterbacks. Talk a little bit about the wide receivers, how this draft changes without some of the players playing. And so that's an interesting conversation. So the draft guide, as I mentioned, is live. You get it with an Edge or Elite subscription. It's such a good deal. That draft guide, probably now more than ever, is useful at this time of the year, and it's taken a huge step in a positive direction just from last year. So you'll want to go check that out. Also, college football is on its way towards coming back. So we have college football subscriptions now that you can get, and that has a college football preview magazine. So you're at home, like I got nothing to do. I need to prepare for football because it's rapidly approaching. You haven't been doing that because you've been worrying about, this other stuff that's happening. Got you covered. Don't worry. You can go grab all that stuff. Plus your fantasy draft. I don't know about you. I've gotten eight text messages in the past day about my fantasy leagues, and they're like 3 weeks later. So I got to cram.
I think that's starting to rev up. Obviously, we're going to have Green Line, and then for the NFL, we're going to have a props product. So there's going to be things for people. And even though this season has been unlike any other, I think once it gets going, it's going to start to feel a little normal. Yeah.
I hope so. And I think that's a call to action for all of us, honestly, just to make sure we continue. It's so easy when things start to feel normal to just like revert. And I think that's going to be a huge key here, is to continue to be smart and to enjoy, obviously, the things that can bring us without, devolving into the issues, the actions that bring about issues. But I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm excited. Let's get right into it with Mike Renner. The aforementioned NFL Draft Guide is live, and the guy that does the most work for it, what is it, lead analyst that we're going with?
Lead draft analyst.
Lead draft analyst, Mike Renner, is in the building.
It's on my LinkedIn.
You keep your LinkedIn up to date?
A little bit. I mean, once every 6 to 8 months.
George has got so many promotions in the last 5 years that it's impossible, frankly.
I do it like once every 2 years when I'm worried that someone that I don't know is going to look at it, and I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm like a teacher in Compton anymore.
At least you're not one of those people who posts life updates on LinkedIn. If I saw anyone, if I was trying to hire someone, they had life updates on LinkedIn, they're not getting hired.
Yeah, there's a pretty good filtering mechanism there. If you post politics or life updates,
it's a cry for help.
Or if you start any post with "Hey network!" ! I feel like that's an eliminator.
All right, let's talk about this draft guide. So you can get the draft guide with an Edge or Elite subscription. It has come so far from where it was. Even just thinking back to this time last year, this draft guide has really come a long way. I'm curious though, what's your favorite part of the draft guide?
The actual draft guide itself. I think my favorite new part this year is we're giving away the game by game grades. You get to see, because I think a lot of the time you want to see, if you're buying a draft guide, if you're into the draft, you want to scout yourself. You want to look at these guys and form your own opinion. You don't just want my opinion, use that as your own. So you want to go see, I should go watch him against XX and X team. This was his best game. This was his worst game. Why was it his worst game? Let's go watch against that. And so now, before we never gave that away, this is the first time you're going to be able to actually go see and look at those games to see which was their best, which was their worst, who they play well against, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because the strength of opponent is something that matters, right? And it matters in in the NFL a little bit. We look at, for example, your Chiefs last year, Eric, when their defense turned it on, but they played no one offensively. But in college, like the difference between your best and your worst opponent is dramatic. Yeah. I'm curious, though, when you look at a guy, because I want to talk about the quarterbacks a little bit. When you look at Trey Lance, you guys had on the 2-for-1 drafts pod, you had Daniel Jeremiah on. Mm-hmm. He loves Trey Lance. And I remember listening to him, and he was talking about, I watched like 2 or 3 of his games. Now, you watch all of the games, all of the snaps, but he doesn't have a whole lot of tape against any good competition. So what do you do with that?
It's tough. And his perspective, why he can watch 3 games and make an opinion on it, guys, because he's not looking for performance. Like, he's not, to some degree, he is obviously like where the ball goes on a given play. But he's thinking you can evaluate arm strength over, watching a guy, how far he throws it. Like, you can evaluate those sort of things. You can evaluate touch, of the talent aspects of the position over a small sample size. Performance takes a bigger one. And yes, he performed well, redshirt freshman year, not elite, not exceptional. It wasn't in a high volume passing offense there at North Dakota State. And so it's difficult to project what he did there to the NFL, but I do think things like accuracy, arm strength, decision making, you still have to read a defense, even if the guys aren't nearly as athletic. You still have to know where to get to the ball to go on time, that sort of thing. And I think he showed a lot of that. And when you have that level of arm strength, but then add in what he can do as a runner, where the dude's 6'2", 225, and probably going to run like a 4.55. He is that good as a running threat. You kind of mix that all in. You say there's enough here to develop. Yes, it's not going to translate day one from North Dakota State to the NFL, but there's enough there to where it makes his life a lot easier. His job's a lot easier than it is someone like a Ryan Finley going from North NC State, where yes, he played good competition, but he doesn't have a strong arm and has no mobility. His life's just going to be difficult in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard because our grades will adjust for opponent, or it's not just, they don't adjust for opponent, but they adjust for circumstances, right? And one of the things that was interesting about Lance was, he didn't face either difficulty, right? Like that team's ahead most of the games. You're always, it's like Ryan Tannehill last year, where you're always passing from like a heavy formation under play action and that kind of stuff. And that's really where the difficulty in projecting a player like that is, because not only do you add in the layer of weak competition, but you add in the layer of he's playing in environments that are not going to always be given to you in the NFL. Like if he's a top 5 pick, he might be playing for a team that sucks and they have to go 3 wide receivers and come from behind in every game. And that's just something we have very little data to support.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I said to Daniel Jeremiah when we interviewed him on the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast. I'm like, until you see a guy actually have to play quarterback, like how he will have to play quarterback in the NFL, there's no chance I'm going to put him above Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. I don't care how talented he is. Those guys are crazy talented in their own right, Fields and Lawrence. And you look at the NFL, maybe the most talented quarterback in the NFL over the past decade, Cam Newton, in terms of like what he can do from an arm talent perspective, from a legs perspective, just who he is. He was never a top 5. I mean, maybe that one MVP or his top 5 quarterback, but he was not a top 5 quarterback over the past decade, because talent only gets you so far. There's a performance aspect that you have to factor in, and we just don't know that with Lance.
Well, when you look at a quarterback, and we were talking to Bruce about this the other day, when you can't see him in all these different circumstances, in many ways, it's probably why there were teams that had big opinions on Mahomes, because when he's playing at Texas Tech, he's playing from ahead, he's playing from behind. He's sort of gone through all of that. We even saw that last season with Lamar Jackson, where he was like last in the league and playing from behind. Yeah. So we get to the divisional round of the playoffs, and we're all surprised that he struggles to throw outside the numbers when he has to make those passes. It's like, and that's really like, so when when you're looking at college quarterbacks, I mean, do you often seek out a player who might have been like a Ryan Finley playing in the ACC, where it's like, he's playing stiff competition, relatively speaking, and maybe he doesn't have the best talent in the world, but if he can overcome some of that, maybe it supersedes some of his lack of ability.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm high on Brock Purdy from Iowa State, is that he's just not have the situation. He is not playing, he does not have a great defense. He's not playing from ahead with a lot of
Turns out Hakeem Butler wasn't very good.
He does not have a lot of talent around him. And so the fact that he is grading out very well in a situation like that, and has done it at a young age, even if maybe his tools aren't near what those other guys are, I think he's not as far off as people might think just based off of, the innate talent level. I think the performance aspect has to be taken in with how just good he's been, Brock Purdy, with, like I said, not a great situation.
Where's the bigger gap between Lawrence and Fields or Fields and Lance?
Man, in my head right now, I'd say it's between Fields and Lance. Like, I just feel very good about both Lawrence and Fields being good in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Lance, like I said, that leap is huge, and you just don't know what he's going to look like when he's asked to drop back to pass 40 times in a game. You just don't know, because the other thing is, a lot of times when he was dropped back to pass, he scrambled on over 10% of his dropbacks. That's yes, he's athletic, and yes, he can. That'll be some of his game in the NFL, but that can't be your entire game. And that was a lot of his game in college. You just have to get rid of the ball in the pocket. You still have to win. I don't care who you are. You have to be basically Lamar Jackson to not win from the pocket consistently, athletically, and Lance isn't that. So I just feel very comfortable about Fields and Lawrence, and not so about.
That's the thing. I don't know if Justin Fields is getting – I don't know if he's getting his due among the draft crowd relative to what he gets from the just college football crowd. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it, I'm guessing, and I'm curious your thought on this, I'm guessing it's because, it's Ohio State, and they do things that make their quarterbacks look great. Mm-hmm. And so, Justin Fields may be amazing, but I'm going to dock him because of the Ohio State factor.
I think that's some of it, and it's just you just saw Dwayne Haskins put up big numbers. Right. And I don't know if his numbers were drastically better than Haskins. I think they were, and obviously the grading perspective, he was drastically better. But I go to the way he operated that offense was he was winning down the football field. Dwayne Haskins had his average depth of target was 4 yards shorter than Justin Fields. Yeah. Dwayne Haskins was hitting crossers, yards after the catch, a ton of screens. Fields is hitting Chris Olave on goes in stride. He was making more of it was on his arm than it was for Haskins. And to do that as a redshirt freshman, I guess he was a sophomore actually because he did play at Georgia. But to do that at that young of an age, it was a ridiculously good season that I don't think, like you said, got its due.
Well, and when we do our projections, he actually comes out a little higher than Lawrence. I think the reasons mathematically, I think, is that when you look at some of their games, Penn State, they were in the meat grinder. He had to play from behind against a good football team. Wisconsin in the conference, well, both of them, right? Yeah. In the conference championship game, they were behind by multiple scores, and he has to bring them back. Even in that Clemson game, he averaged 7 yards per pass attempt. 65% completion, over 300 yards in that game. Those things, I think, are he's got multiple situations where he's had to play pretty well in tougher circumstances. With Lawrence, you obviously had the Alabama game, but the Notre Dame game was kind of a whatever. And then this entire last season was mostly just kind of simple games for him. And he didn't play well early on. And then he had a nice second half of the game against Ohio State, which I think was aided a little bit by referees and things like that. But then in the national title game, he was just not accurate. He struggled. And I wonder, because this is the whole problem with college, with evaluating these players. Fields doesn't get to play in that game. So we don't see some of the negatives that we get to see with Lawrence, who got to play in that game. So it's a really tough, yarn to spin there. I think those two are a lot closer than people think, and I do like your opinion on Purdy there. I do think there's a lot of quarterbacks in this draft that could be taken, top 15.
That's why it makes reaching on a Herbert or a Jordan Love that much more curious, because it's always I got to get this guy now. I can't possibly wait, And you mentioned, all three of those guys to me. Yeah, I know Tua's fantastic, but there is a huge injury question mark with him. You don't mention that with any of these three guys. You also talked about the athleticism. Look at the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. What do they all have in common? They're athletes.
Oof. Yeah.
So, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at this at the end of the year, and I know it's always little rose-colored glasses before they play in their final season, but we could be looking at this and going, you know what? All three of these guys, I would have taken number 2.
Yeah, well, that's what we said last year, right? We got, I think going into this draft cycle, we probably would have taken Lawrence or Fields over Tua in that second spot at least.
One of the things in the draft guide that's cool that you can check out is looking at their PFF grade on different depths. And so you can go compare those guys. I thought you made a great point there. The highest grade on deep throws was Justin Fields. Of those three, you can go look at his average depth of target, see how frequently he threw the ball down the field. I think that's a great point. Let's kind of move quickly to some of the others. So JaMarr Chase, I think he's number 4?
Number 4 on the board.
So the receiving class last year, so deep, right? Deepest we've ever seen. Is JaMarr Chase better than all of them?
Better is tough. I think he's more translatable than all of them. Like Jerry Jeudy, to me, that guy just moves differently. I think you can do a lot with him at the NFL, but I think you might have to play him in the slot a lot. You might have to. He just might not be a complete wide receiver that JaMarr Chase is. Like JaMarr Chase can go up against, I think, any cornerback, any style of cornerback you want, and I think beat them consistently because he's quick, because he's strong as hell, and because he has ridiculously good ball skills. And obviously he's shown that already as a sophomore in the SEC. Pretty much any guy he went against, no one even came close to shutting him down. A first-round cornerback in the national championship game and a second-round cornerback earlier in the season against Alabama, he just torched. And that no one has that sort of track record. No one has it's a very good sort of I'm going to say track record again.
He was so elite that he turned Justin Jefferson into a first-round pick. I mean, that's what's interesting, though, is one of the other things that I think is cool about this is the draft guide is you boil it down to a strength and a weakness for each guy. And with JaMarr Chase, his weakness is lack of high-end athleticism. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that Justin Jefferson, who's a slot guy, like his athleticism was impressive as hell. So it's so interesting. All of these guys have different components of their game where you can nitpick. Ultimately, though, what matters is whether they can win on the field. So how does Chase separate himself without the high-end athleticism?
So he's just not an elite athlete. Like he's a very good athlete. He's probably still going to run the 4.4s. Probably
slow. That's not. You could beat that.
Yeah,
right?
But he's just not. Henry Ruggs is kind of the argument here against him, which it's nitpicking because he's that good. Like you led college football in deep catches, deep yards, touchdowns, everything because he's that good. And he's, like I said, strong as hell. So to be that good, that young, and that complete a receiver who already wins, like I said, from the outside, beating one-on-one coverage, beating every corner he faced, I think you feel good about a guy like that.
Do we think, does he get more targets, obviously, this year with a little bit of a depletion in some of the weapons that they have? Thaddeus Moss gone, obviously, Justin Jefferson gone, and a quarterback that maybe isn't as good at the offense, right? Can't distribute the ball as equally.
That's a good question because they really don't. I mean, they got Terrace Marshall now. Like he'll be all right. Good enough to probably that they can't just everyone go, put a safety over the top of JaMarr Chase. I do think they pump him the ball a lot though, because again, he's going to be open. He's only getting better, I would think, this season. So I think per game he might see more.
Good or bad, statistical comp I keep getting for him when I do the projections is Robert Woods, who I think is a very good wide receiver.
Your boy.
Robert Woods, to me, is one of the best receivers in the NFL after the top 6 or 7.
The man crush is so real with Robert Woods for you.
And he was a player who took a while to get going until they put him in a good offense. Obviously in Buffalo, there weren't
people
players
hear that, by the way, and start rioting in the streets.
If that's what you said, he's
angry at you.
But he's a very good.
It's sort of so like funny. The whole draft process. If you don't comp a first-round pick to a Hall of Fame player, you hate the guy.
If he's not Julio Jones,
what are you doing?
Well, and that was like with Haskins last year. I said something like, I think he's kind of a blend between Sam Bradford and Kirk Cousins.
Asshole.
Like, if you're a Washington football team fan and you're like,
you got Kirk Cousins again,
and you got Kirk
for a rookie contract,
you're doing amazingly, right? Because
maybe a better personality.
It's hard as hell to get a starting quarterback who's consistently good enough to play, but at the same time, all these people they look at the high end, right? Yeah. And look, if I look at if I look at Chase's 95th percentile, I mean, you're looking at Godwin, Lockett, some of those guys that are Victor Cruz early on in his career. You're looking at some legitimate superstars that everybody thought was superstars. But
to me, who I think style on the field, who he plays comp is what people wanted Sammy Watkins to be, or actually probably what Sammy Watkins was before he was a reptilian being.
Real quick, what's Sammy Watkins' age?
Is he probably 26?
That's a good guess, but he's in the 27.
I think he's 26.
Yeah,
and I bet most people will be he's 32.
He's old as hell. Well, that's the thing is he's hilarious, right? And he's not a great player and everything like that. But he's kind of negotiated the NFL perfectly, right? Because he got that 3-year deal with Kansas City, $16 million to be their third receiver.
Made
and now
a huge
he's
play
going to hit the market,
game.
and some dumbass team is going to sign him to be the number 1 wide receiver. He's 27 years old.
I mean, he's ridiculously talented, though. He is. He just, I think it's mental.
He waxed Richard Sherman on that final drive.
Don't, please. It's still there. Compare and contrast in just a couple sentences the top 32 or so players in this draft class to last year's.
Ooh, I think there's obviously a lot more unknowns. I think you got about 8 guys. The top of the draft is a lot better. The middle of the draft is not good, not as good, not nearly as good.
And it seems like, okay, we know the quarterbacks. The wide receivers have been hyped. The offensive tackles last year were tremendous. This year, obviously, Penei Sewell. And then from there, I think a lot of people just don't know these guys. How deep does it go for you?
I think it's a very good tackle class again. It reminds me of, I think it's about as deep as the 16 class that had Conklin, Ronnie Stanley, the guy whose name's escaping me, Laremy Tunsil, and I think also Taylor Decker. I think it's about that quality. Was that Taylor Decker? I think it's about that kind of quality.
You wrote about this, and I thought it was a great topic. So you're saying the top end talent is pretty good. That middle end talent. Now, we always try to inject more certainty into drafts than is realizable. If you're a team that doesn't need let's say the Jets. Let's say Darnold is an average quarterback this year.
Okay.
Are you in a prime position to fool a bunch of teams in the NFL into buying up for that certainty?
That's really
because the middle of the draft is probably undervalued,
and you have the balls to do it,
and because the draft is so uncertain to the point where, I think this year everybody saw the draft is so deep, at least the first 20, 30 picks, that there wasn't a trade down until pick 13. And so everybody's just well, we'll stick with our pick. We'll get a great player. We'll get Derek Brown at 7, And now it's going to be teams are going to be well, if we don't move up and get one of these top 5, 6 blue chip guys, it's a free for all after that. Which some of these teams might just be smart enough to say everything's a free for all. We don't know. There's not going to be Joe Burrow senior year for half these quarterbacks. So how do you think this boils out? How do you think this shakes out?
That's a good question. I do think you'll see. I think you'll see some actual massive trade ups for these QBs again, because I think there will be teams who are gonna fall in love, and I think you'll see someone like the Jets bottom out, but be we still trust Darnold or whatever, or maybe the Panthers. We just gave Bridgewater a contract. Let's get more picks, sort of thing. So I think you'll see trade ups for these top guys, and then with no seasons for a bunch of these guys, I do think the middle, probably picks 15 through 50, are almost going to be interchangeable if we don't get seasons for a lot of these guys.
What I saw this on the Twitter sphere, something around not having more tape on these guys can be good because we overanalyze things, which is basically pulling your pants down on accident.
Okay, I saw that, and it's ridiculous, obviously an absurd thing to say, but there was Derwin James is the one example of that the fact that he fell to 17th when he had what was a down junior year.
Grant Delpit as well was similar.
He would have gone top 5 the year prior, falls 17th. People just overthought it, but that's
your problem.
You're an idiot.
Overthinking is your problem.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that having more tape on the guy is bad,
but it's because if it happens, it means you're bad at this. Is what that means.
Let's get you out of here on this. You love to call your shots with your guys. I don't know that there's anyone I trust more. I want to give you a compliment here. I have listened to a lot of draft podcasts because I think it's fascinating. I want to hear your opinion more than any other draft analyst out there. I think that says a lot. Who's your maybe 2 or 3 guys right now?
All right. Rondale Moore is definitely my guy in this draft class from Purdue. I just don't think what he did as true freshman at Purdue, obviously 2 washed seasons now after that, it's going to hurt his draft stock. but you don't see a guy go for 114 catches, 1,250 yards as a true freshman anywhere in the country, let alone goddamn Purdue. I just think he is special with what he brings to the table, and I don't think he's just a slot. I think he could be like a Steve Smith on the outside. Ooh. I think he's that good. And then Andre Sisco from Syracuse. The guy has, I think, something like 8 more picks and pass breakups than any other safety returning in college football over the past 2 years. The guy runs a 4.3 at like 6'1", 205, and just makes plays all over the football field. Now, he misses a lot of plays, and he takes a lot of chances that he probably shouldn't, but he's also getting maybe not the best coaching in the world, and watching the Syracuse scheme, he's put in some rough situations. So, to me, he's going to be a safety that shoots up boards when it's all said and done. I think Andre Sisco is going to be a
great name.
Here's one player that I have to ask you about.
Yeah.
Kent State's Dustin Crum.
So
your thoughts?
His tape is funny because he just drops back into nothing there. He scrambles, and he's fast as hell, but he's also maybe like 190 pounds. The guy is skinny as hell too, and he throws some like beautiful go routes, but I don't think he's.
Okay. Sounds
he might
like
not get drafted.
Sounds like Eric.
Go back to the drawing board.
It sounds like Eric on a flag football field near you.
Fast as hell.
By the way, that first game, I should mention, that first game we played where you won it on an incredible throw to Mike down the football field. That was our one shining moment, and it all went downhill from there.
Everyone got hurt.
NFL Draft Guide, you need to go get it. Mike, appreciate it, buddy.
For sure, fellas.
All right, so we'll talk about both of these at the end. We're going to get you right now to our boy.
Adam Schefter.
Can we call him our boy? He seemed like by the end of it, he became our friend.
You tried Mr. Schefter. He said, no, it's Adam.
True.
Just like a true gentleman.
The funny thing about that is I was just saying that kind of as a joke. You know, like you never really want to call someone Mr. something. But for some people's last name, like yours, it works.
I'd
call you Mr. Eager or Dr. Eager, really.
I think we both called Chris Mr. Collinsworth the first time, but that's because he signs our checks, right?
That's true.
But yeah, for most people, it's sort of like it's sort of like a little way to like ingratiate the situation, right?
Yeah. We talk some good stuff here, and he has a spicy Josh Allen take. So, Adam Schefter. Joining us now, Adam Schefter. You may have heard of him. Well-known author. Also breaks some news occasionally on ESPN. Adam, thank you for coming on, man. How are you doing?
George and Eric, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I have a conjecture here, and I'm curious if you agree. Were you the most prepared person in sports for the quarantine?
I would say I was as ill-prepared as anybody else.
Really?
What would make you think that I'm more prepared than anybody else?
So here's my thought. You have to always be working from wherever you are, from home,
Yep.
from the bed, from the elliptical, wherever the hell you are. Most people aren't used to that, so they're like trying to adjust.
Well, I see your point there. I will say this, that yes, working out of your house is something that I've been doing now regularly for over a decade for ESPN. So this is not new to me in that regard. And I understand your point now, but what again has been a huge adjustment is just the frequency with which you're home. Mm-hmm. Usually I have a day where I go to Bristol. I have a night where I'm in New York. We travel the Monday Night Football, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And there's none of that. Like I have not spent a night away from my home since the first week in March, which is unimaginable to me that we're in mid-August now, mid to late August, and I never leave. Like I never get to leave. And I'm also not the swiftest technological person, so all the Zoom calls, like one we're on right now, that has not been exactly easy for me to pick up. And so in some ways, yes, I've always done this. It's not anything different. In other ways, it is as challenging or more challenging than it is for other people.
Yeah, as somebody who randomly was next to you on at the combine while you were working on the treadmill, like I marveled at your ability to sort of like do all of us like are trying to get a sweat in, and you're able to lap us all with your work there. As somebody who has struggled to adjust to the quarantine,
has trouble with Zoom calls.
Look, I have all the same troubles too.
Am I muted? No, you're not.
No, you're not.
Yeah, well. Yeah, we've people have had issues with that. That's been well documented, and you get used to it, and you try to figure it out and do the best job you can. I just think in today's world, all rules are off the table, right? Like, oh, you're late for a meeting. Oh, your dog's barking in the background. Oh, you've got to look out for your kid because something's wrong at home. Like, okay, there's more understanding than there ever has been before, but everybody's dealing with different challenges than they have in the past.
Yeah, that's very true. Here's a question I have, because you're often, asked about the what, and in your job. I think we rarely get to ask you the why. When you look at the NFL this year, like where's an underdog team that you think has a chance to make it either to the playoffs or advance in the playoffs? What's an underdog team that you've been had your eye on this offseason?
Well, look, let me tell you something. The NBA playoffs are underway, and I don't know when your podcast here will run, but we've already seen the Magic beat the Bucks and the Blazers beat the Lakers. Oof. And I'm sure some people might not believe that those are upsets, but we usually don't see the 8 seed beat the 1 seed at all. But there's no home court, home field advantage anymore. There are any number of circumstances that I think level the playing field. So I think we're entering a year that makes it more likely that there's a team like the Detroit Lions or Cleveland Browns or a team that hasn't been to or won the Super Bowl that makes a real move. Cincinnati, Miami, the Jets, but like somebody like that, right? That we're not used to talking about in that regard. I just think the playing field is a lot more level in circumstances like this where any team could be losing any player at any time, where home field is not the factor it was, where everybody's dealing with different circumstances. Just think that things are a lot more even.
The Lions are a great call.
I love your pointing out home field advantage too, because one of the things that's interesting to study is the better teams have better home field advantage. It's sort of a cyclical thing. They have better fans because they're good, but now it's like those good teams are not going to be able to feed off their fans who have expected great things, like Green Bay, New Orleans, Minnesota, for example. And so a team like Detroit, I think you bring up Detroit, which is a great example of a team that could do
That's why LeBron and the Lakers went like 6 for 35 from 3 last night, as you alluded to. Because they had no fans cheering them on. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I wonder, though, will some of those coaches who are better at preparing their teams, the Andy Reids, the Bill Belichicks, will they be able to overcome that lack of a home field because they're so much prepared just for whatever randomness happens? And my guess would be that there will be more randomness. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think there'll be more randomness, but there are certain coaches, like the best play callers in the game, the guys that immediately come to mind are Andy Reid and Sean Payton and Kyle Shanahan, Josh McDaniels, Sean McVay. Those are the 5 best in my mind. I think it's going to stand out. Like what these guys do, to me, is elevated by the fact that there's no home field advantage, because I think their offenses are always tough to stop, always, no matter what. Now, maybe the Saints defense won't have quite the advantage. And the Saints defense has played very well because they're feasting off the crowd noise and are able to use that to their advantage. Maybe they can't do that. And so maybe the defense that I think has been very good. I had them as my fantasy defense last year, loved them. Maybe they're down a notch. Maybe because the crowd noise gives them an advantage at home.
That's interesting. All right, some quick hitters to get you out of here on, because you've got to go do SportsCenter. What's the longest that you've gone without looking at your phone or any one of your phones?
There was an incident recently where I fear now, like I'm at home, I have no direct contact with ESPN tech people. Like, what if something went wrong with my phone? It's like, it gives me the shakes, to be honest with you. Like, it makes me nervous. But there was one time where I was visiting my son at a sleepaway camp during the 2011 lockout. And I knew I was driving into his camp on a July morning in 2011. And fortunately, they set up the lockout the night before. So things were as calm as they could be the next day. But I went into the camp about 8:30 in the morning and emerged at like 4. And it was like 7.5 straight hours of nothing. And that's awful. That's just miserable. I don't like that.
Even I would struggle with that.
Yeah. That's hard. Yeah. That's why we don't send them back to camp there anymore.
How normal will this Super Bowl be?
Well, first of all, let's hope there is a Super Bowl. I think the NFL is determined and planning to. I think there will be. They're going forward the season, so I think there will be a Super Bowl. Will there be fans? I don't know. Will it be limited? I don't know. If there is a Super Bowl, and we hope and think there will be, I would guess it's nothing like any other Super Bowl. Nothing like any other Super Bowl.
I'm excited for it. The Michigan helmet, always present in the background. What's your favorite place to go grab a bite in Ann Arbor?
Well, I love Zingerman's.
Okay.
Everybody that goes to Ann Arbor loves Zingerman's. Delicatessen do a great job. Always have done a great job. What's the name of that place? This guy, drawing a blank on his name. Monty Osteria, excellent Italian, and the Mexican place next door. Same owner, by the way. Excellent. They do a great job, and so fans of those places.
That Zingerman's is so good. My dad went to Michigan that we would order and have them deliver it to us in California. And the one that I would mention that I'm curious your take on is the Gandy Dancer.
You know what? Gandy Dancer was the place to go while I was in school. And when we were taking my son to school there to basically move in. But by the way, the name of the guy at Monty and the Mexican place is Isalita, Adam Baru. Adam Baru, he owns the places, both places. My wife and I went to Gandy Dancer for our anniversary. And it was good, but it wasn't what I remembered.
Okay.
I'll just say that.
Yeah, some places lose their luster. It's tough. Adam Schefter, we appreciate it, man. Thank you for hopping on. And
that's
anytime.
all, huh?
Well, look, you said you had to go. I want to make sure you have time. You got another minute for us?
I got 5 more minutes.
Okay.
You get me out the door quick. I appreciate it, but I got 5 more minutes.
Well, football is all about efficiency. Adam, you you're unlike the running back that takes 300 carries to get 1,000 yards. You're over here 5 yards a pop.
Start feeding me the ball. I want the ball more.
Okay, so let me give you
the football.
Let me give you the ball here. We have talked a lot about the AFC East. Who's going to win it? In Vegas, Bills and the Patriots are neck and neck. Our simulations would say the Patriots have a decent advantage. How would you break that division down?
I am not picking against the Patriots until Bill Belichick and Tom Brady are both gone. Like
gone, or like dead gone. Like
not running that team anymore. I know Tom's gone, and okay, so yes, it's different, but they still got Bill, right?
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't put anything past him ever. And I think Buffalo's really good. I think the Jets are ascending. I think Miami's ascending. I think those teams are set up to have sustained, good, productive runs. But I'm not ready to say that those runs start right now this season.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good, when you look at, you say like Belichick or Brady, which one is more responsible for this success? We're not sure, and we're gonna test half of that theory this year,
I guess. But Cam Newton's a pretty damn good replacement. Yeah. So one of the things I think is interesting is the training camp videos are now replacing preseason performances, and we saw Josh Allen throw a beautiful deep ball against Air yesterday, and everyone is just having a field day with it, and immediately projecting him to jump into the top 5 passers in the NFL.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Okay.
I'm
like Josh Allen.
Hyperbole. You like Josh Allen.
Yep.
Do you think passing-wise, because objectively, as a deep thrower, he was not accurate last year. Do you think he makes, and I like Josh Allen too, but do you think he makes a jump this year as a passer, or are they going to have to leverage his running more and some of his underneath throwing more?
Well, I think he makes a jump as a quarterback. I don't know if he's going to do it as a pass. I mean, accuracy is a tough thing to just learn, right? And he's not been incredibly accurate, but he's been an excellent quarterback. So I think his game, his play can be elevated. I don't know that his accuracy will be. I think him as a quarterback, yes, I think he'll grow and improve. That's what he does. That's what people do. But accuracy is a tough one.
Isn't the number one thing? So you look at the great quarterbacks. Isn't accuracy the number one thing that you mentioned for all of them?
I think it is one of the most important traits. I think there are a lot of traits that go into it. That is a critical one for a quarterback. Maybe the single most important one. But there's a big conversation there to have.
No, it's a fascinating
I want my quarterback to be accurate. I think Josh Allen's accurate enough to be a really good quarterback in this league.
Okay. Yeah, that's really the good question, right? Does he, like, if you're a Bills fan, does Allen have to improve for you to be good, or is he currently good enough for you to be good? Because he already increased his completion percentage 6 percentage points last year. So it's like, but I think that's where everybody's split. I do think they're a great team, and Allen's really going to be the fulcrum as to whether or not they're a contender.
Adam's answer is kinda. He's good enough now for them to continue ascending. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree with that. I think they will continue ascending. I think they're a good team. Again, I don't know that he can become a more accurate quarterback. I don't know that quarterbacks become more accurate.
I think you're absolutely right.
I want to give you, we have like 25, 50 seconds left, a comp for you in talking to you for the first time. You remind me of how Fred Gaudelli talks. Have you ever gotten that before?
Well, Fred Gaudelli, I love Fred Gaudelli. Got elected to the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame this week. Has been the head of basically Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and somebody that I wanted to work with. I thought we were going to work together. He had me do 2 games, replacing Andrea Kramer when she was doing the sidelines. I worked with Al Michaels and John Madden and had so much adrenaline in my body. I was so nervous about it that I was like shaking when they were throwing to me for the very first time. And I thought when my contract was up at NFL Network that I was going to go to work with Fred. I thought that was a real possibility, and I would have loved that because he's so good at what he does, and I have so much respect for him. Never happened, but I'm a huge Fred Gaudelli fan.
Well, that explains it. Fred Gaudelli and I share a love of Lebanese food and football. Fred Gaudelli is the absolute best friend of the podcast. Okay, now we're up to 12. Oh, an absolute legend. Speaking of legends, Adam Schefter, we appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Adam.
Go kill it on the
guys,
little
thanks
stuff.
for having me. I appreciate it very much.
I have never been so happy, but also kind of embarrassed for someone to be like, "Hey, man, I've got 5 minutes left. What are you doing?"
No, it was great because we were trying to show that we respected his time, and he was trying to show he respected our time. So I thought that was great. Maybe the next time we're on Seren Petro's radio show, we just tell him, "Hey, the show's not over yet. I want to talk some more." Seren, build that in.
We'll get.
It's like soccer extra time now. Your show goes until 6 + 3.
It really is incredible, and I'd never do that. Whenever I'm going on Seren's show, I just know I'm not setting a hard time limit. I might make it to the gym at 7. I might make it at 7:30.
The only time you know it's over is when you guys joke about me.
That's true. That's true. Did you think that my Fred, because you've talked to Fred a couple of times, did you think that my Fred Gaudelli comparison in the way that they talk was accurate?
Yeah, very upbeat, very point, but also able to sort of goof off a little bit, but sound serious. I mean, it was an apt. I think you spent more time with Fred, but it was an apt comparison. I think
what really got it for me was they didn't waste a word. There was not a word wasted, and the efficiency was impressive. What was the one thing that I wanted to ask you about was that he mentioned was the Josh Allen thing, and he obviously talks to everybody in the league. And so I really was curious what his thoughts were because I thought, there would be a kind of a glimpse into how the league evaluates Josh Allen. Do you think that idea, he's not accurate, but he's going to be a better quarterback, is that even possible?
I don't think so. Here's my thing on Allen, and I think we got to it at the end. The Bills did a really good job last year of facing facts and putting an offense. Our colleague Kevin Cole wrote a terrific article about him midseason and said how they were winning. And I put it differently when McDermott signed his deal. I said they're losing less or they're failing less. But the Bills seem to think that he's limited and maneuver around him in a way that the Bears really didn't with Trubisky, right? The Bears tried to make Trubisky into a real quarterback last year and he failed miserably. My question is, when you're aggregating opinions around the league and you look at the way that the quarterback position is, I think that there's an incentive for people in the league to want Josh Allen to do well. I mean, there's a top 10 pick. A lot of these top 10, Jameis is a backup. Mariota's a backup. You look at 2016, Goff and Wentz are fine, but Paxton Lynch sucks, right? Like, when you look at the quarterbacks and how they've done, like Mayfield, we're going to be in that position with Mayfield in a year, Murray maybe. Like, I think that there's a big, I think the league understands that there's an incentive for some of these quarterbacks to do well, and I think they're all pulling for Josh Allen in a real way. And that doesn't mean that he's not going to be good. It just means that I think we have to view it from that lens when we hear it from somebody within the league.
Here's the thing: it's in stark contrast to the way that people didn't pull for Mitch Trubisky. So there's that part of no, Bears fans did.
Yeah, true.
I did not hear people around the league going, you know what? Mitch Trubisky's a leader. He's a winner. That I didn't hear.
You had Jim McMahon stunting for him and stuff. I think
True.
it was a little bit more mixed.
Maybe I need to go back.
Allen is universally liked as a dude.
And Drew Lock, people that have now Drew Lock's a different story because he's done it for no time at all. He's a child. But both those guys, and we talked about this with Bruce, right? There is a human component to all of this. There's can you overcome adversity? Do people believe in you? Will they give you a second chance?
Yep.
Because everyone needs one, right? Tom Brady needed second chances to get to where he got.
Yeah.
And people believed in him because he was a hard worker, and they go, look, I know this guy just fucked up right here, but just like you, if you fuck up on something, I'm giving you a second, third, and likewise.
Yeah.
And that, I think, for quarterbacks is important. And maybe Josh Allen hasn't.
The thing about Allen is we just simply don't know. And you know it, right? Both of us are various degrees of likable, but I think we're both likable.
Well, speak for yourself.
And people just generally give people who they like more opportunities. Yeah. And I can imagine that Josh Allen is a very affable person, and people want that person to succeed. And maybe that's not true about other guys who are a little bit more people root against Brady.
True.
Actively now, right? Manning was never that way, but people you think about Patrick Mahomes, people actively no one hates Patrick Mahomes around the league. No one. Right. So if Allen had figured that out, I think it's probably pretty smart on his end.
That was a fun show. But we've got some fun ones coming up here. So next week we're gonna have some fantasy stuff because we've got. I don't want to give away names here. I'm just gonna let you guys know that it's not gonna be one you're gonna want to miss. We may or may not have the Josh Allen fan of the century.
Oh yeah.
And the number 2 Josh Allen fan of the century.
Who is that?
I'm just letting you know it's gonna be awesome. And then we've got Kevin Clark coming on. Either later next week or the week after. So
we're going on his show tomorrow.
And we're going on the Ringer NFL
a little
show
home
tomorrow.
and home.
So there it is. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to pick up an Edge or Elite or a college subscription so that you can stay sane.
There's really nothing that you can buy at our website that won't be awesome right now.
Yeah. And if you need a little help with it, you know where to find us. We got your back. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.